Thank you so much for coming out. I'm humbled to share the stage with these guys. So many of you probably saw my presentation yesterday where I talked about the state of retail and the industry of what has happened. And today we're going to take more of a forward look. So Circana publishes an annual holiday purchase intentions report. So I want to share some of the key takeaways from that, and then talk about the current state of the outdoor business and what I expect through the end of the year. So anyway, with the holiday intentions report, we do have some good news. I know I shared a lot of bad news yesterday, and if you haven't kept up with the newspapers while you've been here, you may have seen or may not that there have been a number of layoffs from larger companies, which continue to follow the trends of some of the macroeconomic headwinds that we're seeing, and will presumably have some impact on those higher income shoppers that are continuing to spend. So we'll see how that pans out. But in the meantime, shoppers this year do intend to spend more this holiday season, about 3% more than last year. So that's good, right? Over 40% of the shoppers with children plan to spend more. And I had mentioned yesterday that parents are tending to spend more on their kids and sacrificing purchases of their own. So I think that'll be one thing to see this holiday season. Millennial shoppers plan to spend a little bit more, which is good because their spending has been down. And Gen X and Boomers, keep it stable this time through. Now, one of the most interesting things that we've seen is really the shift in spending habits. A lot of you are probably aware the holiday season is not what it used to be. We're seeing earlier kickoffs starting with the back to school season, promotional days and competitors in October, which kind of changed planning. The main takeaway here, though, is that shoppers plan to start earlier. More than a third already started in September, another 30% in October. And, while I think the beginning is important, there'll definitely be a late spike as well. But definitely spread out, and consumers are looking for deals on Black Friday, certainly seeking value. One of the things that we use to kind of forecast the holiday season is the performance of micro holiday trends, which have been less impressive this year. When I talk about micro holidays, I'm talking about anything from Easter to Mother's Day, Father's Day, 4th of July sales, things like that. But many times the categories and brands that do well during those promotional periods tend to do well during the holiday season. So, looking across a wide variety of categories, brands like Lego, Oura Ring has been on fire this year. So, that tells me that there is a focus on health and wellness and, to some extent personal data, which is fun for me. But Owala, another brand that I called out yesterday. But consumers are definitely looking for newness. There have been some other gifting themes that we've seen across categories, particularly with health and wellness, and also nostalgia. I think in troubling times, consumers like to kind of think back to a simpler time, and we're seeing growth from nostalgic products across industries. And then, of course, seeking value this holiday season. And I'll reiterate what I said yesterday. Value does not necessarily mean cheap. It's more of a focus on, where are you going to trade down and where are you going to spend on more premium products. And that's where I think, especially retail is perhaps, well positioned going into the holidays. Holiday shoppers primarily driven by sales and promotions. Savings is going to be a big part of it. So we asked about plans to save money this holiday season. Some will buy more items on sale, and there will be a lot of sales, we expect. They'll purchase more store brands, and I think that's more focused on the private label at grocery. But nonetheless, individuals are willing to substitute less expensive. And that said, almost a third aren't going to change what they're doing. So, I think the core audience for many of the brands here are more stable than some of the lower income that I talked about yesterday. And then as far as the attitudes and perceptions that impact behavior, a couple call outs here. Everything that's on this list has increased versus last year. So I'm kind of surprised that almost 70% of consumers plan to give more to the less fortunate this year, because that's not what I'm hearing in the general public. And then I want to cut down to the bottom right. About a quarter of consumers say political issues will impact what retailers they choose to shop at. I expect that to be the same sentiment for brands. And over a third are looking to support causes that are important to them. So, I was talking to a few individuals earlier about, the outcry when NPR was defunded and people kind of stepping up to support public radio. And I suspect that the same is true with individuals wanting to support local shops. Great news when we look at the outdoor industry as a whole. This comes specifically from the report that we produce in partnership with OIA, the Outdoor Industry Retail Market Report that's available to members. So if you are a member, you should be looking at this. If you're not, you should become a member so you have access to OIA's great research. But what you can see here is the 12 months, the 3 months, and the last month. This is through August. But the main point is the momentum building into the more recent time periods, particularly in the last 3 months, covering the summer. So whereas sales were down in the low single digits, we're up 1.4% across the board. That growth primarily coming from apparel, which was up 2.6%. Footwear has really been the standout this year. Really from footwear, running footwear, trail running, etc., more so than traditional outdoor hiking footwear. Equipment is improving, so is accessories, but still, a bit of a rough go. That said, we do an ongoing report that's updated quarterly, called the Future of series. We do the future of apparel, future of footwear, and with that we have some predictions for Q4 and a 3-year outlook. This is across all apparel and footwear, not just outdoor, but we do expect to see a 3% growth in dollars for apparel, 2% growth for footwear, and I think the thing to watch is the demand levels. So some of that increase is based on increased average selling prices. And, the only other thing I want to call out for Q4, I do expect that there may be a little bit of a false sense of security going into Q4. There was a little bit of a slump in spending last year, kind of that leading up to the election fatigue, which then kind of resurged at the beginning of the year. So, if you're kind of doing the math, we may see a little bit of an increase in Q4 that may then show a decrease in Q1. Let's hope that's not the case. But I'm now going to turn it over to Gabe. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. That was great. Hi, my name is Gabe Meyer, president of Grassroots. And so I'm going to take you through a little bit of just specialty retail data and data that we look at. First, just want to give a brief overview of what is Grassroots Outdoor Alliance. We were founded in 1994 by specialty retailers, still owned by those retailers, and focus really on community education, profitability, and connection and gathering through events. Our membership is made up right now of 104 retailers across the U.S., about 225 locations, doing $550 million in overall sales. And then we have 73 vendor partners that make up kind of our vendor group that we work a lot more closely with. So all the data that I'm going to go through comes from either directly, retailer surveys or self-reported information that they're sharing with us, and same thing on the vendor side. Our average Grassroots member, just to kind of ground in the type of specialty store that we're working with, average of $3.5 million in annual sales. They've been in business about 40 years. very active in their local communities. Our average member donates 2% back to their local community. And then they carry about 200 brands in their store. So that's kind of the typical makeup of a retailer. We think, hard to pin exactly how many independent specialty stores out there, but I think our data represents maybe about 10% of the overall independent specialty market. So going through the landscape, and some of this is brought on in the last couple of months, we had Rutabaga Paddle Sports, Summit Hut in Arizona, and then Next Adventure in Portland had all announced closures this year. And so it kind of pulled us into let's do a little bit deeper research on that. Next Adventure and Rutabaga are both working with buyers, and I think we'll find new life through a store transition, but Summit Hut did close, so that was a big loss to our community. But it really, was like, hey, this is a chance to take a look back and just see, are we living in an abnormal time? So this is ownership transitions and closures over the last 10 years within our membership. From 2016 to 2020, we see 5 ownership transitions and 6 stores that closed their doors. In the last 5 years, we've seen 17 stores transition ownership and 4 close their doors. So, and also during that time, we index pretty low on new stores because we have membership requirements that need to be in business for a certain amount of time. But 6 of our members also founded their business in the last 10 years as well. We deep dive into those retailer ownership transitions. The 22 of them, 4 of them went to outsider individuals, just people maybe in the community that weren't known to the store. A large majority, 14, went to employees, customers, and family. So that's where we're seeing the most. 2 of them sold to another specialty retailer that was nearby, adding a door, and then 2 of them sold to a national retailer. When we break down retailer closures, the 10 of them, 3 of them kind of abnormal circumstances, a family death. One of those stores received an offer on their real estate property that they couldn't turn down. It was a retirement type thing. And then just generally moving on. 4 of them, so not a huge over-index here, but overextension of the business. A lot of Amazon 3P focus. And it's worth noting that we probably have another 3 stores that we've seen leave membership due to financial issues that were also wrapped up in Amazon 3P. So that's a message that we're giving to retailers is just, kind of risk versus reward on that. And I think as a lot of brands have been also experienced, the margins for the amount of work in that type of business just hasn't been that sustainable. And then 3 of them, what we would call kind of a normal closure, just unsustainable business in their normal markets. So out of the 32 sales and closures, 67% found new ownership, which we think is a really healthy and positive message that we continue to see as store owners are aging out. We are seeing younger store owners kind of take up the business and breathe new life into it. So I'm going to also go through just some marketplace trends and what we're seeing from a sales perspective. This is quarterly comp sales percentage change from 2018 to 2025. And so a message that we've been hitting a little bit, and we kind of want to ground. You look at 2018, 2019, very normal years probably in the industry. We all know what happens during 2020 and 2021 and 2. And then over the last 3 years, 23, January on the dot starts the first comp decline month. And we're down all the way until kind of the end of 2024. In 25, we've started to see signs of recovery there. We look at that top line from 51 of those stores. The bump overall from 2020 to 2022 was about 83 million. So you can really see in this line how much of a gain there was during that period. 2025, the line is estimated if we finish, currently year to date, we're up over a little percent within membership total. But about 74% of those gains have actually been retained by retailers, which I think is a really positive message as well. We look to kind of the bifurcation and what the difference in results are across retailers. This tells kind of the deeper story because obviously there are retailers that are struggling today. There are brands that are struggling today. I think one of the key things I wanted to point out is 2021, that's like a once in a century year. If it ever happens again, we saw 80% of our membership grow more than 15% that year. 93% of membership grew more than 3%. So to see every retailer, regardless of community, regardless of where they're at in the industry, grow is something that I don't think we'll see again. So coming off of that, 2023 and 2024, we had 60% of stores, both of those years that were down more than 3%. So while 2025 isn't this like super vibrant sign of like everything's back to normal, we are seeing signs of recovery. So 3 times as many stores that are up over 3% this year compared to last year. And then if you look at that dark red bar at the top, those are stores that are down more than 15%. We see that decreasing as well, and now have less than 50% of stores that are down more than 3%. We look at retailer inventory position. So this is retailer survey. How are you feeling about your inventory position? We started doing this in 2023, which was, you can see we had over 70% of retailers that were feeling over inventoried or extremely over inventoried. That changed a lot when we hit 2024, and we've seen kind of continued improvement. This fall 25 was the first season that we didn't hear any retailers say they were extremely over inventoried. So again, continued improvement there. When we look at vendor inventory level sentiments, this is the same thing. We see a big change in fall of 2024 and then spring 25 and fall 25, where we have a little over 80% of brands saying that they have the right amount of inventory for the market conditions. Some anecdotal trends that I wanted to go through also. These are mostly from like my conversations with brands that we work with. I saw a marked increase in brands that said that their preseason orders are actually up going into spring 25 or spring 26. The last 2 years have been, preseason orders are down. It's not looking good. We're seeing retailers build more into ASAP. I think retailers are getting into a healthier inventory position, and so brands are indicating that that's up. ASAP business has also been stronger. So orders that retailers are placing in season has been pretty strong in 2025. A trend that we expect to continue to see is just more retailers moving away from Amazon or direct online business, in the sense of trying to build a huge part of their business into that. Most of our retailers are doing business online, but it's more buy online, pick up in store, making sure that their inventory is searchable. So we have like 80% of membership that's doing that, but shipping products to customers that are not your core customer is a decrease. So 2026 retail outlook, I think we're going to continue to see bifurcated results coming off of the kind of boom that we saw in 21 and 22. That was a period in which everybody was allowed to grow without a whole lot of effort. And we're just going to continue to see a shakeout there in which business models are going to survive. So I think we expect to see some additional closures, maybe both on the retailer and brand side. But generally, all of our signs are pointing towards stability, even in the face of margin compression issues with tariffs and pricing. That's all I've got.
I'm going to stay seated because I was on this train last night and just...
The fancy mess.
So this is the executive track, and I want to see IDs to see how many people are actually executives in here at some point. Seriously, I'm curious who's out there. I can see some people, but how many people are actually in media space out there? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6. And there's not that many people here, so it's like a Thanksgiving dinner, really. And so I got 6 from media. How many people from marketing PR? So another 4, 5, 6. Brands? There we go. Okay. Who did I miss?
Retailer.
Retailers. How about that? 1?
That'd be with us.
We should all shut up, and you should come up here and start talking.
Respect.
Thanks for coming. Everything we're saying is directed to you. One of the odd things about all this data, which I believe all of this data, I think it's really good data. They pull, great sources, it's good. One of the things I can't reconcile, and I'm trying to figure this out, is that last year we had 181 million people participate in outdoor activities. That was the most ever. In the history of tracking this, I don't know, back in 1945 if there were more, but I really doubt it. And that's amazing. And if you look at the growth, we haven't had a down year in participation in growth since the 90s. Maybe there was a dip. So we've had this continuous growth for 25 years. And in the last 5 or 6 years, including, I know, the pandemic and a lot of people got outdoors, there was, 25% growth. It's close to the exact number, but remarkable growth. And if you think about any other industry that had that much growth, video game industry, you'd see companies just exploiting and leveraging that and booming, right? It's what would happen. 25% growth is a lot. Pickleball, I don't know what it was. Massive growth in pickleball, and overnight companies come up and start industries and companies and brands and retailers. And I ran on the trail yesterday, and pickleball courts out. If you went on the trail and you went north, you saw pickleball courts, and people were on them playing pickleball. So that's amazing, and that's pretty. It's amazing to see that. But we, for whatever reason, have this incredible growth. 181 million people. That's 60% of all Americans. That's, by the way, Matt talked about political issues and supporting causes. It's bipartisan. I spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C., and we are a nonpartisan organization, and we have to talk to Republicans and Democrats. Because they all care. They all care about being outdoors. I can't go into a Republican's office and go, do you care or not? Because they care. 60% of them, I have to assume that 6 out of 10 meetings I have, people care. So it matters. It really does matter, that political issues. I'd be really super careful, picking a side, or you're going to lose some business because of that. But what I can't reconcile is, why aren't we growing more? Why isn't there more growth in our industry? And so what we did was we tried to dig deeper into the participation. That's what we do. They know the revenue and the sales and trends better than us. When we do it, we get it from you. And so we tried to look into participation and tried to figure that out, and we're not done. We have a giant piece of data. It's 120 pages. It's super thick. It's on the website. There's a primer for anybody on the website. And by the way, we're not some gigantic tech company, so we did our best putting up this data and little tabs, and you can dig into each of the categories. There's 3 categories. I don't know how to use this clicker. I'm going to try. There's 3 categories: casual, active, and core. And we try to dig deep into those categories. Some of it starts to blur together, so I'm going to leave a little bit of that in the short amount of time we have and condense it up. And trying to figure out why they're motivated to do what they do and match that with the trends that these two see. And again, as I said, I've talked to some people out there. I don't know where you're at. Backbone, there he is. I'd like to start layering more data on top of this so that we can figure it out a little bit more. So up until this point, back in, I don't know what it was, 2005, there was a group of people in a room that all did data for outdoor, and they decided that if you ran, 3 times a week, you were considered core. So they took all 51 categories, not including pickleball, and they defined how much, if you are engaged with activity, you'd be core or you'd be casual. And it was this binary. You're either core or casual. And I don't know anyone out there that really is one or the other. You're just not. There's this giant group in the middle that we felt like we were missing. But for 20 years, we lived with this core and casual. We defined it as you're either core or casual. And as the market changed, as everybody changed, it just felt like there's got to be something else out there. And so that was part of this study, to start to segment that group in the middle that at one point you hit a line and you became core. And we don't think that's true. We think there's this group in the middle called active, what we've called active. I'm going to start with casual here. I'm going to go work my way into active and then to core. And they're all really important. Casual is about 40%, actually. Casual is about 40% of the consumer base, of that 181 million, according to this data. And that represents about 32% of the total spending. And that's because they spend $569 a year. It's probably a lot of Stanley water bottles. No, they're active in all kinds of acquisition. They mainly shop at Amazon or other mass markets. Doesn't mean they're not shopping at specialty. Doesn't mean they're not shopping at Bass Pro or Shields or REI. Doesn't mean they're not shopping at direct to consumer. But generally, they said Amazon and mass market. That was pretty obvious to us that it seemed like that makes sense to us. Here's the thing. It's 40% of the participation base and 32% of the total spending. It's an important market. It's a giant group of people. What drives them? I'm going to hold on to happy for a second. You see happy up there. I'm going to talk about calm. Calm, as you know, is the opposite of agitated. And when you go outdoors, you feel calm. When you were in grade school and you were acting out in the classroom, although maybe some of you didn't, but I have experience in that. And they would say, go out in the hall, go outside, and you get calm. That's the easiest way. Let's take a walk around the block. You're at work when we used to be in work, and you take a walk around the building to get calm. That's what outside does. That's what being outdoors does to you, and it feels good. And that was one of the top drivers for that casual market. It's really important to remember that because it's very different than active. They all wanted balance too. Balance is a theme that we can see throughout. Balance is related to your overall mental and physical health. If you have balance, you can do a lot more things in your life. I think everyone here understands that balance and being calm. Of course, we get that outdoors. It's hard to have a fight with your wife when you're hiking the Colorado Trail. You can disagree about something, but you feel good. You're out there. You're calm, and and that's what that casual market understands. It makes me feel good. The active group is 50% of the consumer base. So these are people that are, depending on the activity, just remember, if you're mountaineering, a core mountaineer is probably 3 times a year compared to running, which is probably 4 times a week. So it's different depending on the activity. So they're much more active than the casual participant. But it reflects 53% of the total market, the total consumer spending, $758 a person. So if y'all think about how much each person that comes into your specialty store spends, or any acquisition at any store, think about that $758. That's how much they spend a year on average, according to this data. They also added, their shopping habits reflected adding sporting good, what they call chains, and so it's REI, Bass Pro, Shields, the ones I named earlier. By the way, they all have specialty in there, but for these 2 categories, it was much smaller. And they also have direct-to-consumer. All of them have direct-to-consumer purchasing in there, aside from Amazon or mass retailers. What drives them? Hold on happy for a minute. And you can see balanced, which we had earlier, but they add confidence. It's very different than calm. There's not a single person here, I don't think, that confidence doesn't impact. You come to an event like this and you mingle with people and you talk to people and you create stories. You get on a train and you walk up and down on that train and you talk to people and because you're confident, you can do that. It's a really important difference between the casual and the core. They do this because it helps them with their confidence. They feel confident doing it. They like being out there. They like not necessarily conquering something, but deep down inside, I went and I did this. I run 3 times a week on this trail and I feel really good about it. You can't come home from that run and not feel really confident about it. It's very different than feeling calm. You might feel calm also, but you're really confident. And it affects you in all of your life, everything that you do. And it's important to recognize that, because if you're trying to market to those 2 groups, obviously balance and happy plays into this, but confidence is very different than calm. You'll see it in core in a moment too. So again, it's 50% of everybody that walks into your store, comes to your website. 53% of that, of all of our sales comes from that group of people. It's really important to understand them. And again, this is really basic data I'm giving you. We go really deep into this. The last one is core. It's 10% of the consumer base, 15% of the total spending. I don't know if that, and so 15 or 16% of the total spending. They spend 1,084 on average a year, but they are active every day doing something, mountaineering multiple times. Whatever it is they do, of the 51 activities, they're much more active. They're the ones, though, that you recognize in the neighborhood or at your community, wherever that is, at the bar, at the coffee shop. You recognize them. Oh, that's the woman that does this. She's the backpacker. She's the hiker. He's the climber. You know them. They stand out in that community. They're leaders in the community. They often take people out. They have confidence. They have great confidence. They also are happy. But they get excited about this. They go onto Strava and they post, which some of the active people do. They don't just post on Strava. They're going to tell you, and they're going to look up other people. I'm going to find that person that was doing the same route as me. I'm going to see if I'm faster than them. It's really important to them to have a conversation with you about Strava. Now think about this. 2 people go on a hike, one's casual, one's core. They come back, they're in the coffee shop or they're here having coffee, and they're talking about what happened on that hike, that maybe it was on Monday afternoon or yesterday afternoon. And there's a different conversation going on. The one person's talking about Strava or the GPS or the miles or the minutes or the elevation gain. And the one that's casual just said, I felt really good out there. Felt nice to be out there. It's a totally different conversation. And to recognize that when they come into the store or are in that buying process, it's really important, because it depends on how you talk to them, how you market to them, how they're going to react to that. I don't think the calm person wants to be talked to about aggressive hiking and again, the Strava notes. My wife would be casual. She does not want to hear me come back and talk about, yeah, mile 5, I was doing this. She's like, I don't really care what you were doing. I just like the flowers in the field that we passed. And that's exactly what happened. And then we didn't talk to each other for 24 hours. Kidding. Oops. So here's my takeaways on this. They're all 3 important categories to recognize. We're going to dig deeper into this. The data on the website, or if you're a member, you have access to it. It goes really deep. It's 120 pages deep. I think it's important to understand that confidence in the active. I think it's important to understand that calm in the casual. They're very different. And I think it's important to understand excited. But the one overlaying factor, and I've said this before and I'll keep saying it until everybody says this, it's really important. It's happy. We are in the business of selling happy, no matter what. Everybody comes back from that hike and they're happy. It's the common denominator between casual and core happiness. So when people come into your store, or you're marketing to them, or you're writing to them, or you're putting out PR to them, it's all about being happy. It's whatever drives them to do this more, because they're super happy doing this. We can't forget that. We should design for happiness. We should market for happiness. Everything that we do is grounded in happiness. And not all these other industries can say that. I just don't know. When I re-upped my Microsoft Office subscription this year, I wasn't really happy about that. There's a big difference in that acquisition and going to the store and saying, I need to get another backpack for mountain biking. That makes me happy doing that. It makes all of us happy. It's the most important thing, I think, that we take away from this. In holiday season, they're coming in to make someone happy, or themselves happy, or both in many cases. So that's my big takeaway from this. It's super simple. We did all this data and research, and really it just comes down to being happy. Be happy and making people happy and be around other people that are happy. That is all I have right now. I'd love to share more data, but it's a long read. So grab me if you want. If you're not a member, talk to me. If you want access, let's have a conversation. I think we're up for Q&A right now.
Yeah.
Anybody has questions?
Thanks so much. Let's hear it for our panel around the state of the industry. Really insightful, very interesting, different takes. So you're kind of all spread out, which I didn't think was an issue, but now I realize I've got to get the mic around for Q&A. So we have this catch box. If none of you have used it before, you just toss it around or hand it around and just speak anywhere near it, and it'll it'll record the question, which is very important. So I see some questions already.
What you got? Oh,
Let me get the catch box to him, all right? We'll go one and then over to Deanne.
Do we have a dot?
Yeah, I'm going to throw my arm out. Here we go. Ready?
Good stuff, you guys. One of the things that I didn't hear you guys talk about that I'm curious if there's some correlations is we've got really good POS data. We have really good information from the big retailers, the industry, the macroeconomic trends that you brought up, and then also specialty retail. I did not hear about secondary markets. And I know that there's been somewhat of a rise of that happening. And as we look at, 42% or whatever of the casual users coming into this, how many of them are potentially bucking those other retail channels for secondary markets? And is that impacting some of the lack of growth that we're seeing? Is that a blind spot for us?
right.
Can you define secondary market real quick?
Yeah, there's some startups out there. I know that there's some recycle, upcycle programs that brands are doing, that retailers are doing. There's Facebook Marketplace. I feel like on the weekly or monthly, I'm seeing new platforms and marketplaces pop up. Even just, gear trade events. A lot of these specialty retail shops have trade days or whatever you call them, gear swaps.
I'll speak to that real quick. And then, Matt, you want me to pass it to you? I can just say within our membership, it's 25% of our stores are doing used gear. That number grows every year. We're writing a feature story on it that's going to come out next week. But one of the most interesting things is when a store does pick up used gear, like within a year, it's become 10% of their business. So pretty quickly it becomes meaningful. We don't see a lot of cannibalization of sales. So oftentimes what most of our stores have seen is that the used gear person comes in, they give some gear away, that gets sold, and then they use that to purchase new items. And it gets a whole different crowd into the store than it has previously. So we see that as a huge growing movement within specialty retail.
Yep.
Yeah, we don't track secondhand sales specifically, so I don't have any data points, but I've done my own research looking at some of the information from like ThreadUp that does used apparel, and there have been many more brands that have started secondhand programs. Some seem successful. I've heard some retailers doing up to 35% of their store sales in secondhand, which is, I think, fantastic. I think it's going to be even more important moving into next year for sure. The one thing I will say, there are a number of larger companies with financial backing that have made large scale attempts. And I think it is more costly and probably more appropriate at the local level because, if you look at some of the financials, while they may have high valuations, they haven't been profitable. So, definitely keep an eye. And I think there's going to be it'll definitely benefit specialty in the coming year.
I would plus one all that. There's again, there's just without the amount of time we have to go into this, but one of the challenges that I see in participation, I said that 181 million continues to go up. And I think it's going to go up again next year. But what's not gone up is the amount of engagement, especially at that core level. And engagement would mean I do this more. I participate in this activity more. It's just for a decade remained flat. And that's part of you see that casual growth that we're getting. So there's a direct correlation in what we see in this participation data in the number of times that people continue to engage in other activities and the amount of times they mentioned that secondary or repurposing or that market that we're talking about. There's a direct relationship between someone that came in that was casual or active and engaging in additional activities or that activity more and that secondary market. for sure it's critical for the future. It's especially getting people to engage more, which I think is a potential problem if we keep going up to 185 million, but we remain flat in engagement. People just don't do it more often. I think it's a great answer for that.
My question is around direct to consumer. And Matt, does your data, does that include direct to consumer numbers? And so if that's growing, how does that impact the actual dollars that we see coming into the industry?
So the majority of the information that I've shared yesterday and today does not include direct-to-consumer. I spoke specifically about point-of-sale data from sporting goods and athletic specialty stores. However, we do have several data sources that provide that information. First thing that comes to mind is our checkout receipt panel, where we're getting the information from consumers. So they are providing us those that are widespread enough to collect enough receipts. Think of anything from Peloton to Yeti.com, but it is a growing part of the business. But what we're seeing is there are a lot of brands who launched as D2C that have then shifted into retail. The bike industry is a really good example of that. The brands that have grown in the last year are kind of like D2C natives. And then we're also seeing retail brands shifting to D2C. So I think it's, in some ways, it comes out in the wash. But I think it's important to explore. And I don't think that the margins are necessarily as high as we want to believe they'll be for getting into D2C, but I do think it's going to compete with retailers more and more, particularly as some retailers are, preferring to sell out of product this quarter than have to sell off at a discount after the holidays.
Excellent. I think we've only done this study once, this particular study, so we'll do it again next year. So I'm not going to have a great answer for that until next year, but it clearly resonated direct to consumer with the participants that it's happening. I don't know if it's going to grow next year or not, because I have one piece of data in time, and it was clearly there, and so. The second part of that is I don't know if it's a brand that is selling direct to consumer, or if it's a brand that sells wholesale and direct to consumer. We didn't differentiate that, which was we'll change that next time, so we'll know what it is, because it was one of the probably top 5 things that hit us when we're like, oh man, this is a lot bigger than we thought in terms of that group of people, and it was across the board. Casual, active, and core. There wasn't any greater percentage in any, but it's part of it.
I guess is the unique identifier how many times they participate, and that is what is identifying them in each category. And then as we move forward into next year, is that going to be tracked against where they move from category to category? So if we can see that casual is moving into core, or similarity between active and core.
Yeah, it's part of the tracking, and at that minute level, tracking, how many people are participating more in any one activity from one year to the next. There's a couple trends that we see right now that are slightly disturbing. I will say there's some really positive trends. There's this group of people that are 55 plus that are just booming in increasing that engagement. So they've moved from casual to active, and we see them now moving into core. And so there's an age, whether they're approaching retirement or they retired, they're just really active. And I think it happened during the pandemic that let's go out and do this. And they're still doing it. That's a really positive trend we see. The negative trend that we see that makes us really nervous, I'm going to preface this first and say that we also look at ethnicity in this, and we do see positive trends in growth in people of color, but it's not near what the index of the population is. And so we're happy that we see this positive growth And we see that in casual and active and core as well. We see that across. It's still so far below the indices that at some point, if the population continues to shift in America, it's going to be a problem if we can't get the index up. The other disturbing trend is white youth, male in particular, just declining precipitously in these activities, from 14 to 19 years old, just a massive decline, offset by people of color, youth of color, for sure offset by it. But it'd be great to have all those growing. Again, we see that decline coming in active and core for that category. So we do track it against that from year to year and try to look at those shifts. And some of that is in here as well. Did that answer the question?
Yes. One more quick.
All right, I have another question related to kind of some of this engagement data. Are you seeing any negative impacts from barriers to accessing the outdoors? You know, I think about, I'm local to Colorado. The highway is always a mess on the weekends. Parking can be a nightmare. Trails are crowded, et cetera, et cetera. I'm curious if that's something that's pervasive enough that's impacting kind of access and engagement overall.
We have anecdotal information in this in two areas. Access to you and I might mean something different than access to somebody that lives in Detroit, in downtown Detroit. So both of them are problematic. Our foundation, Outdoor Foundation, is all about figuring out ways to get access to people that just don't have access of any color. But we see where we see it affected most is in the casual participant, the one that we're trying to get to engage more. They go up past Netherland to the July 4th trailhead and there's 4,000 cars and they go, I'm done. I am never doing this again. It was clear in the data that one experience will turn someone off for a long time. I got my food, I got my clothes, I got everything ready. We drove up there, we stopped to go to the bathroom, we got there, and we had to park 2 miles away from the hike that was probably going to be a 2-mile hike. Casual. Big turnoff. And I don't know what to do about that. The core participant doesn't go to July 4th trailhead. Go somewhere else. They know how to do it. They know where to go. They've done that 10 years ago, and they go find another spot where there's nobody there. I think it's a big problem. Access at both of those levels, I think, are big problems. I think it's a 10-year problem in participation. The one that probably is most glaring to me, besides white male youth declining, I don't know what. I just assume they're playing video games or something, or doing something else, or they're playing team sports. Something else.
All right. Thank you so much to the panel. We are out of time. We'd keep going for a long time.